Good evening. I'd like to welcome or open the Monday, October 25th, 2021 Board Work Session open and to order. The first item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. Do we have a motion to approve the agenda as presented for this evening?
I move that we approve the agenda.
We have a motion by Dr. Costa. Do we have a second?
Second.
And a second by Ms. Sullivan. Do we have any further comments, questions? Hearing none, we'll call for the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Hearing none, the agenda is approved as presented. The next item on the agenda is moving to closed session. The Kent County Public Schools Board of Education members of this board, Dr. Karen Couch, the superintendent, Mr. Dan Hushin, supervisor of human resources, and Gail Manley, executive assistant to the superintendent, will move to closed session under General Provisions Article 3-305B to discuss the appointment, employment, assignment, promotion, discipline, demotion, compensation, removal, resignation, or performance evaluation of appointees, employees, or officials over whom this public body has jurisdiction, as well as any other personnel matter that affects one or more specific individuals. With that being said, do we have a motion to move into closed session?
I move that we go into closed session for the state provisions that were said.
We have a motion by Mr. Johnson. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
We have a second by Ms. McGee. Any further comments or questions? Hearing none, we'll call for the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes at 5:32. Ms. Manley? We are now going to move into closed session. We should return at approximately 6 o'clock p.m., about 30 minutes. I'd like to open the Monday, October 25th, 2021 Board Work Session, open session to order. The first item on the agenda is reporting on closed session. The Kent County Public Schools Board of Education members, this board, Dr. Karen Couch, the superintendent, Mr. Dan Hushin, supervisor of human resources, and Gail Manley, executive assistant to the superintendent, met in closed session under General Provisions Article 3-305B to discuss the appointment, employment, assignment, promotion, discipline, demotion, compensation, removal, resignation, or performance evaluation of appointees, employees, or officials over whom this public body has jurisdiction, as well as any other personnel matter that affects one or more specific individuals. This session was for information and discussion purposes only. No action was taken. Personnel actions will be voted upon by this board after the Pledge of Allegiance. The next item on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. Buckle, would you lead us? Thank you. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is the superintendent's report, which is personnel actions.
Thank you, President Getz, school board members, Dr. Couch. Each month, the board receives a report of stated personnel actions. These actions are discussed in closed session and then voted on during the open session. The administration seeks approval of the stated personnel actions.
Thank you, Mr. Hushin. This is an action item, as Mr. Hushin just stated. The administration is recommending approval of the stated personnel actions. Do we have a motion to approve the stated personnel actions?
I move that we approve the personnel actions.
We have a motion by Mr. Johnson. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Dr. Costa. Any further comments, questions? Hearing none, we'll call for the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes. Thank you, Mr. Hushin. Okay, the next item on the agenda is public participation. Ms. Manley, do we have? Okay. As Ms. Manley is walking that up, just some comments on public participation. Speakers should limit their comments to 3 minutes. Comments about the actions or statements of individual staff members are not appropriate for public comments and should be referred to the superintendent of schools or processed through available channels. If submitting written testimony, speakers are requested to provide a copy to the president. Please remember that this is an opportunity for the community to address their comments to the board. It is not an opportunity for dialogue. If you have questions that need an answer, please contact the superintendent or write a letter to the Board of Education and a response will be sent back to you. These public participation moments will be also timed for 3 minutes. When the bell goes off, please limit your comments after that as we can move along. The first person up, Valerie Walters.
So, school boards are the governing body of the district they serve. They handle the nitty-gritty things like setting the budget, the curriculum, policies on discipline and safety, the district school boundaries, its calendar, and even bus routes. You hire and evaluate the superintendent. But the board is also in charge of the big picture. They set goals and monitor schools' performance and educational quality. So let's talk about a few of those things, beginning with the budget. Enough is enough with the excuses, when clearly there was over $1 million left in the bank at the end of last year's fiscal calendar. Wouldn't your time and energy have been better spent actually understanding your budget and appointing the funds in the proper buckets instead of pointing fingers at the commissioners and using the excuse, the overplayed excuse, of there's just not enough money for everything? Curriculum. I'm told by several teachers that the curriculum is either ever-changing or that they do not have updated books or any books at all. That's elementary school. Or that it is simply not clear. Do you think that that has a direct reflection on the academic achievements, or should I say failings, of our county's current standings? Furthermore, can someone please explain to me Why in an English high school class we have currently chosen the topics for essays and assignments that we are currently being advised. I'll let you do the homework on those. Do you even know the current assignments that are required of students? What is the standard that the high school teacher is asking them to demonstrate? Furthermore, are they even being asked to write an alternative topic to demonstrate mastery? And if you have any educational background, you know that that is important in an English class. And why are all the articles for assignments for them to annotate from a strict political-leaning site and webpage? What actually happened to studying works of literature and Shakespeare? What's going on right now in that school is not appropriate. Policies on discipline, policies in general. These policies are clearly stated in the Code of Conduct and have not been followed. Accountability is a must. Consistent accountability is a must. You may not discipline based on race. That is a pure example of discrimination. Transparency with parents and the community is also a must. Your own policies on hiring are not being adhered to. Pursuant to Maryland Education Article and Code of Regulations, you hired someone who should have been ineligible. Someone charged and convicted of an assault is not hireable as an educator in our school system. A teacher that preaches division, a teacher that was put in charge of children disciplined for not following rules when she breaks laws herself. How and why? Our county public school seems to be reactionary and not proactive. Enough with the excuses, hold yourselves accountable. We need out-of-the-box thinkers and forward thinkers. Soon we will not have a county public school system at all. As every other county around us is growing in numbers, we are the only one shrinking, and for that you should look at yourself and ask why. I think there are several factors as to we are not performing like we should, and it comes from the top. Good leadership at the top or the lack thereof. So my words to you are step it up or step down, every single one of you. Furthermore, I fully support the calls for a Citizens Advisory Committee. The committee would be a formal way for parents to work with Kent County Public School advocates for students. Although the focus recently has been on discipline, this is just one example how our school system and Dr. Couch have failed our children. I think that it should be made clear that any Board of Ed member that votes against it is voting against collaborating with parents and supporting our schools. You have been made fully aware of several issues and actions that are needed. You are ultimately liable for the willful neglect of the students in our county.
The next participant is Barb Reed.
Good evening. As mentioned, my name's Barbara Reed. Valerie, that's a tough act to follow, hon. So I'm talking about teacher-student ratio. It's needed to ensure quality teachers and adequate teacher ratios. So we're looking at boundaries and maybe rezoning. Why do student-teacher ratios matter? The student-teacher ratio has been found to be one of the strongest indicators of student success and engagement. Logically, it's little to wonder why. The fewer students each teacher works with, the more closely they're able to adapt their teaching to specific learning styles, and just perhaps we could increase our currently failing academic scores. The class sizes at Garnett and Galena are likely double the sizes at Rock Hall. It's unfair to our teachers and students. Garnett has a 25-to-1 ratio, if I'm not mistaken, roughly, in our kindergarten, and in 4th grade, it's a 24-to-1 ratio. It's rare that there are less than 20 students in a class at Garnett. I'm not sure why parents are not complaining about this more. Our teachers are burned out. Rock Hall Elementary is sitting with less than 200 students in their whole school, and all of their classes sizes are 15 or less. Some of them even have 10 to 13 students, is being reported. We have 350 students at Garnett, and Galena has around 250 students. We definitely need more teachers in some buildings, but Garnett has no more classrooms available. Title I tutors are working with students in the hallways and storage closets. That's true, that's crazy. You need to rezone so the schools are more even and, just help with the enrollment numbers. The middle school does not have much more students than Garnett, and they have a lot more supports, teachers, and staff. With all the turnover rate here in this county, new teachers in the county have a lot more expected of them. You know, they could be great, but the great teachers, they don't always have the classroom management that comes with experience. So just curious how much learning is going on when the teachers can't manage their classrooms. We're going on the open door policy as much for not only transparency, but full inclusion. Teachers and staff should not be afraid to speak up about their concerns or share ideas. The best administrators are those who welcome conversations and new ideas, collaborations, and support. Many school administrators accomplish this lofty goal by instituting an open door policy where teachers and students can feel free to come to the door if open. And a 2012 study by Keith Klein found that transparency contributed a mutual trust and cooperation within its school staffs. I'm not sure if I've ever met a successful leader who was not accomplished in the open door policy with their staff and employees. The conflicts of interest within the board and our public school system is very disheartening, and that's been going on for far too long. So if we could take a look at that, you know, just the current schools and how are they sizing up even against each other. I think more parents should have shown up tonight to voice like what they're experiencing. And just furthermore, I too support the calls for a Citizens Advisory Committee. The committee would be a formal way for parents to work with the Kent County Public Schools to advocate for students, although the focus recently again's been on discipline. And just want to hold the board accountable, the administration accountable, and then make it clear what board members are voting to support it. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, the next item on the agenda is Board Policy BCF, Board Advisory Committee.
Mr. President, members of the board, you have before you the second reading of policy for the Citizens Advisory Committee. The administration recommends approval of this policy.
Are there any additional comments or questions regarding the policy before we go to a vote?
Well, I just have a couple of comments. An awful lot of attention has gone into this issue of a Citizens Advisory Committee, and I don't really understand why the board has to approve this. Any citizens can create a committee. We have a number of committees with citizens on them that are pretty effective. You know, we've had one on facilities, we have one on special education, we have one on equity and excellence, used to be called the Multicultural Committee. I would like to see more citizen and especially parent involvement in our schools. Mostly, I think it's really disheartening when, you know, we don't have people joining the PTA or going to meetings that the principal calls and the staff prepares and then parents don't show up. But I would like to see more targeted committees than this general advisory committee that I think is going to take a lot of staff time and not really produce results. I'd like to see a committee on what we do for very able students, especially in the early grades. Before sixth grade, we don't do much, and I think we should. I'd like to see a committee that looks at field trips for all grades. What's the best age to go to Philadelphia or Washington or New York? And we're going to try to start a foundation that hopefully will raise money for field trips. But we have some excellent local field trips like Echo Hill and the Sultana. But I think our students should all visit Washington, D.C. once in their school career, and I think they should all see Philadelphia. These are major cities, and people from all over the country come to them. Our students only have to go a couple of hours. Those are just, and maybe we should have a committee that looks at discipline. There are lots of things we could have committees about, but I think they should have a real targeted focus and have a beginning and an end, and they make a recommendation to the board, and, I'm very interested in what any citizen has to say, but I don't think we need this general committee that's, I've seen some people say, oh, it should look at budget priorities. We usually have such a tight budget, there's almost no wiggle room for anything, because the vast majority of the dollars go to salaries. I just think that this committee is going to cause a lot of staff time that could be better used if we had more targeted committees. So that's why I'm not going to vote for it.
What do you mean by staff time?
Staff time, because a committee will ask for all kinds of information that the staff is going to have to get, or the superintendent is going to have to get. And that is time consuming, and it can be very helpful, but if it's just, I just can't see, this committee that, we've asked for revisions and the superintendent has provided them, but, I think the issues that parents of elementary school kids are really different from those of older kids. So, how are they going to establish an agenda, what they want to really, discuss, and, what is really the purpose of this? Just to get more parents involved? There are plenty of ways to do that. But I don't see that this Citizens Advisory Committee is going to really represent people very much. I just think it would be much more effective to have more targeted committees that solve the problem they're set out to solve. And I think the issues at the high school level are pretty different from the ones at the elementary school level. And so I don't see, nobody's convinced me that this committee will improve anything for children. And I think it will end up, using a lot of staff time that might be on wild goose chases.
I just want to add a little bit that we still need parents in our PTAs, and we still need parents to be vocal with the administrators and teachers in their schools, and to understand that regardless of how the vote goes tonight, if we have the Citizen Advisory Committee, their purpose is not as a mediator between parents and the board and parents and administrators, that you still need to reach out to your administrators and your teachers and talk about the issues that you're having. So to understand that it is not a way to funnel and filter things to the board. And again, PTA, we are struggling to have parents on our PTAs, and that is a real boots on the ground, doing things in our schools that is extremely helpful for our teachers and shows parent support and for our students. So we have 13 people that could be on this advisory committee. I'd still love all of our schools to have full, busy PTAs.
I would too.
Any additional comments?
Yeah, go ahead, Nivy.
We're at a crucial time, I've often said this in education, where we are called to do things differently, called to, and I think I've advocated since the pandemic in the beginning of our school year, I've often said, we did some things one way, and now it's time to uproot and do something new. I think I've often, when I first ran for school board, I talked about feeling this new energy, this new wave. I don't know what that looks like, but I still feel this energy. And so we don't know unless we try. That's the biggest thing. And, that's the part of policy. We can revisit it every year, when it's never set in stone. But we can't second guess ourselves at the beginning and not, because at the end of the day, what does that look like when we try to teach our students fixed mindset and growth mindset? that's something we preach in the classroom all the time, to have a growth mindset, to try, push, and then reevaluate later. So that's just my couple words.
Yeah, I have supported it from the beginning, and I haven't wavered. I like the point that Mrs. Sullivan made, that it's really not a conduit to the buffer between the school board and the public. And I'm wondering if we hadn't had such a chaotic, tumultuous start to the school year, if we'd all be looking at it a little differently. I mean, I think it's such an immediate lens to look at that maybe you might not have had to say that if everything was going smooth. The other thing is, another thing is, this idea came up before everything that happened. You know, I think maybe this has made it maybe more immediate, more urgent. When we had our retreat in May, you know, we were probably patting ourselves on the back a little bit that some of these goals and aspirations that we said we were going to go after, one of them was transparency, another was accountability, and I think that we have to, if we're going to talk the talk, we got to walk the walk. And, you know, this can be revisited at any time, but if we keep putting it off, there's going to come a time when there won't be a chance. I don't think so. Once everybody else has said their piece, I'm going to make the motion that we approve it.
Yeah, and I'll just add a couple comments. I mean, I spent some time, really taking in the emails that were coming in for support, taking in the emails coming in against this. And then I went back and I looked at the community list and the parent involvement that we discussed 2 work sessions ago in the summer. And, yes, there are school committees specific, advisory committees, program committees, PTAs, school improvement teams, mentorship programs, and you go down the list. The board itself listed, CCAC 1, STEM Advisory, Gifted, Talented Council, Environmental Literacy, Summer Program, Calendar Committee, Minority Recruiting Committee, and then it goes into all of the partnerships that we have in Kent County and also crossing the river in the various groups. So, I'm just not sure that an overarching committee is one that will, I fear that the work that has to be done not only locally, but then also come up, my concern is something will be missed. But, again, I mean, this is something that when you take a look at, the policy and being able to revisit that, it's one of those things that we should be revisiting policies all the time.
I don't think a reason to, and you're not saying this, but I want to make it clear, I don't think a reason to vote against it is because it's going to take too much work. Everything you start, when it starts, takes a lot of work. At some point, I don't think it will be a lot of work.
And I'm not questioning a lot of work,
Yeah.
because it will take a lot.
Yeah.
If it's effective,
Right.
There should be a lot of great work.
Yeah.
I'm just not sure where that fits in with the other 50 committees that in some form or fashion, support the school system or have voices into everyday operations. So that's just my point on it.
We have groups that are, committed and, speaking to us. SOS is a kind of citizens committee, and they've made, recommendations. I think people on this board are very open to suggestions. I don't think it has to be some kind of committee that's sanctioned, by us. That I think it would have more sort of influence if they just met whenever they, a group of citizens come together and people join it, that have more than 13 people, and they would, discuss things, maybe request information, and make recommendations. But I don't see why they have to be a board committee. I think they could just be any group of citizens, any group of parents. Why do they need to be, maybe there are a lot more people than 13 who would be interested. I don't understand why there's this big deal about this committee. I think, if we have it, maybe it'll help, but maybe it won't. And if we don't have it, people in the community can form their own committees.
As
Yes.
sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Dr. Costa. As we look ahead, if the committee is approved, the timeline of getting names and submission would be start immediately, and names would have to be in by when, just to get on
Policy states October 31st.
October 31st.
Yeah,
We'd have to
we'll
push
have to
that back,
adjust
change
that.
No, I
We'll have to
understand that,
adjust
but
it,
that's,
yeah.
I just want to be clear, that's
And
what it states.
And that is my, one of the things that I would like to talk about. Once we take a vote on this, then we can talk about the application.
Well, so I hear what Dr. Costa says, and, you know, we'd all like to say that that any citizen could come talk to us at any time and we're accessible. But a lot of people just aren't comfortable doing that. I mean, if that was the case, we would be, let me tell you what, I think I talk to a lot of people, but I certainly don't talk to 5,000 or 10,000 people. And, we get a sprinkling of parents, and it's really, other than the mess up with the school buses, we don't really get that many emails. Even with the Citizens Advisory Committee, I don't think we even got a dozen. So we know that there's support out there. I just think it's another way to make us accessible to the public and makes it, not only makes us more accessible, but it makes it easier for them to communicate. Some people just don't know how to do it. They'd be doing it more often if they did. Like I said, I think I know a lot of people. My job, my day job certainly puts me out in the community a lot, but I don't think I talk to enough people. Let's put it that way. And I think a Citizens Advisory Committee would give me the opportunity to talk to more people, or at least hear a representation of more people. I don't expect 500 people to come to a school board meeting, but a group of 13 people could certainly could be speaking for 500 people. And I don't think you can ever go wrong. There's no such thing as having too much information, and being just as informed as you possibly can when you make a decision. And we're asked to make some of the most important decisions in Kent County. So.
But wouldn't we be able to make better decisions if we had committees that, had a real purpose, had a real charge?
Well, I think part of the minutia in this policy is that it's either the school board or somebody representing the administration helps put an agenda together. It's not like 13 people are going to show up on, April 15th and July 15th, and just, helter-skelter and throw stuff out at us. They're going to put some, there is an organization to it. And I don't think there's anything I can say to change your mind, so I'm not going to try.
I think we should just vote on this. I don't think it's a very important thing,
Okay.
really.
Well, you've made that pretty clear.
So, I think if we have one, fine. If we don't, it's not going to make really any difference. But I think there are things that really should be addressed, and I don't think this committee will do it. I think you really need to have a much more targeted, our targeted committees work well. That facilities committee did. This is, and if the administration is going to be sort of running this, then it's really not a citizens committee. They would just have more, I think, power to kind of determine the issues if they weren't, part of, sort of guided by the administration, if they were just, people out there.
Just a
But-
matter of clarification, it's the two people that would chair the committee would be two board members, not the administration.
No, I know that, but
Yeah.
No, I was
isn't
just-
there something in there about somebody facilitating, putting an agenda together?
Yes.
Yeah. Well,
Work with this.
isn't it, I'll say one last thing. I said I wasn't going to, but I will. Isn't it possible that out of a discussion with the Citizens Advisory Committee, we find out that, hey, you know what? here's another standing committee we need to have.
Well, that's quite
Okay.
possible.
So,
Yeah, I mean, go ahead.
I think Sam wanted to say something for the
Yeah, I just didn't want to really cut into that. I mean, I don't really have voting rights, so my say doesn't really matter. But I mean, as a student, I believe that there's no harm in trying and just voting for it. And I mean, I know that you said even just specifics, Dr. Costa, but I mean, like I see in this policy where, I mean, we can have temporary ad hoc committees that are formed for limited period of times for specific projects, initiatives that are non-binding and don't really have to be part of that board, but can have, take on these specific projects. And I just think that we're focusing too much on the what ifs. And I just think that if we look past at other counties, bigger counties, even just Eastern Shore counties who have a citizens advisory committee or some sort of advising committee on them, they're not doing harm. They may not be doing as much of an impact as we want them to do, but I don't think there's any harm in trying and just, having someone who is looking over the board and advising them on something, even if it is something broad that then we can push temporary, specifics into. I think that we have amazing groups like SOS and the PTSA, but to bind and kind of censor any citizen from wanting to join a broad group, I don't see why we would do that. And specifically I know that we're all probably excited to see more people here at these meetings, and I think that we have citizens showing up, and for all we know, we'll have citizens show up for an advisory committee, or we'll have citizens show up to do something else besides the PTSA. I know there's a lot of things that stop people in different areas of focus that people want to kind of commit to, but I don't know why we can't at least try to have a broad citizens advisory committee. And if it doesn't work, we can go back, reform, make changes, and if it does work, we can, stick to it. But instead of focusing on the what ifs, I just think we should kind of put trust into the citizens and what they can possibly do and just vote on it.
I have a question. So the administration is recommending that we approve this. Are you the administration? So tell us, you don't have to convince me, but I want to hear what it is that makes you recommend it.
Okay, well, I think that getting an opportunity to have a broad section input from all of our schools is important. I mean, I think certain times we hear from just a certain school, but gives us an opportunity to hear from all schools. And
All schools at the same time in the same room hearing the same thing.
Right,
Yeah.
right. And also an opportunity to get more citizens' involvement. I agree that it's not going to hurt in terms of the ability to reach out and have an opportunity to hear what others think. And we drive the agenda, but also the committee members can help drive the agenda too. So I personally am of the opinion it's not going to harm, and it can only help in terms of outreach for the community and from our schools.
Also, I think if your superintendents champion something to begin with, that gives you a little bit more, juice.
Any additional comments? Anyone down the left there? Okay.
Good.
This is an action item. The administration is recommending approval of Board Policy BCF Board Advisory Committee. Ms. McGee, are you still
Yeah,
In for the motion?
I'll make the motion that we approve the Board Advisory Committee.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
We have a second by Mr. Johnson. Any additional comments or questions? We'll call for the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
The motion passes. The Citizens Advisory Committee is moving forward.
Okay, I would like to talk a little bit about the application itself. If you look at the initial application, it said that we would have the form returned by October the 31st. I would suggest that we extend the deadline to December the 9th. That gives us an opportunity to collect the applications and prepare them for the board to review at our December meeting.
Do you have the date on that? I'm looking up the date.
The December meeting is, hang on.
I think it's the
13th?
December the 13th.
13th, yes.
So if we have it submitted by Thursday, that would give us an opportunity to copy all of the applications and hopefully be able to, the board has to determine who's going to be on that committee.
With the expectation that we'll actually select the committee on the 13th?
I would hope so.
Okay.
Dr. Couch, can we have a digital version of the application on the website? And then, since we are including community members, are we going to put out a press release or something for the
We'll work on
community?
something, yes.
Okay.
Can I just ask, can we move that to December 6th? Only that there's enough time to get applications in. It feels like if it's Thursday and for whatever reason, it's just really tight on the back end.
It's certainly up to you. I was just
That gives
trying
it
to,
30
I was
days.
just trying to give us a little bit more time, just simply because, we've got the holidays in there.
Oh, okay.
And I was just trying to come up with a way to extend the deadline in terms of getting more participation and more opportunities
That
for
makes
people to
sense.
submit applications. So, I
We
mean.
don't have to rely on the mail,
Right.
No.
It can be electronically.
No,
Yeah.
but it's entirely up to you. I mean, whatever you want to do. I just suggested the 9th. Still gives us an opportunity to copy all of them, and I can certainly send them to you as they come in. So it's not like you're going to be looking at them all for the first time on the 13th.
Yeah, I would like that as they come in. That gives us more time.
Yeah. But you tell me. I'm open to whatever date you would like to
Yeah,
put.
I mean, I'm just thinking that it would have been nice for it to have a little bit of bumper on the back end, but that doesn't mean that that's needed. I mean,
So the deadline would be the 6th instead of the
can I ask Mr. Poor a question?
9th?
Mr. Poor, are you able to place a PDF with populated fields, and that way it can be completed online, saved, and sent in? Okay. Okay, thank you.
Great.
It just makes it easier rather than trying to scan it or take a picture and send it or do whatever that looks like, so, thank you.
So you tell me what date, because I'll put
we
it on the
decide?
It
application.
doesn't matter to me, guys. I just,
Do the 6th.
Okay,
Sixth,
December
yeah.
the 6th.
Okay.
I will adjust the deadline, and then we'll work on getting something out and putting it out there and making sure that the principals know that they can
Great.
push it out in their social media accounts as
Perfect.
well.
excellent.
Can we, on the page with the application on the website, include a link to the policy? So if people are interested, they can quickly see what the policy is? Okay.
Also, it's not something that we have to decide tonight, but the fact that everybody's coming on board at the same time, how do we adjust? Is it a one-year term or a two-year term? I'm just saying so that we can stagger something so that
I thought-
not every year we're putting 13 new people on.
I think that's
what
part of
we
what the
are.
board's going to have to make
Okay.
a decision in
Gotcha.
terms of, how many.
For the
are
first
gonna-
time,
for
we're
the
gonna
first
have to
time.
say,
And then
you know-
once we do that, then it's going to be fine.
Yeah. And just to throw this out real quick, a spitball, one way to do that might be able to say, like, the two members from Galena, one will serve one term and one will serve 2 years, so that, you can get that staggered. I'm just saying that that's a possibility.
Policy.
Yeah.
I don't expect us to decide tonight, but. just
I
saying.
mean, I think it's important that we made a decision so we can move
Yeah.
forward.
Absolutely.
Do we want to make that decision tonight so that it's very clear and folks can determine if they do want to be on the committee, that they have an option to choose and maybe toggle if if they're interested in 1 year or 2 year?
Wouldn't it
Well,
have
I
to
thought-
be part of the policy?
I
Wouldn't
thought
that
the
be?
policy said it was for a one-year term, and then they had the option to do a second year. And I feel like that's pretty clear.
Yeah. Okay.
When will we appoint from the board? Are we going to wait till January to do that, or?
I'm hoping that we can do it in December.
Okay.
I mean, obviously, if we don't have enough applications, we'll have to cross that bridge when we get to it. But, my goal would be to try to appoint and have the membership decided at the December board meeting. we may have to start a little bit sooner. We may have to have an extra long opportunity to talk about it, but, you know.
Can we also discuss at the November, well, which is coming up, the November meeting, what, from a timing standpoint, that tentatively we have an organizational meeting in January scheduled, because the goal is to get it started January 1. I'd hate to have to come back in January and say, oh, by the way, you know, we have a meeting scheduled in 1 week, which we have to just be cognizant of schedules. I mean, we
Well-
can just outline tentatively that, as we're doing now, December, we would identify the members of the committee, and then tentatively, whatever we discuss at our November meeting could be a short conversation that we would look for, I don't know, the third Monday of the month, just so that folks know that
The
if they're
date
signing
set
up for
for
something,
January, okay.
you know, that we have an idea and that it sticks to that, right? I mean, it could change, it's flexible, but at least folks going in know where they're not surprised that they have a meeting in 1 week and they can't make it. I'm just thinking kind of a little forward on that, from an organizational standpoint.
Okay. I can work on a timeline.
Okay. Okay. The next item on the agenda is the academic data discussion. I see Ms. Giacomo's walking down.
Good evening, President Getz, Dr. Couch, members of the board.
Good evening.
When we met in August, we had an opportunity to look at our strategic plan, and at that point, we shared our goals for the strategic plan and specifically spent time discussing academic achievement. At that point, we had available the spring measures of academic progress, and that is what you had decided to guide us with as a district in terms of making decisions and setting targets. So tonight, what I'd like to do is follow up on that, because you had asked that we come back to share with you the results of our fall assessment. We have once again given the same assessment. This is a nationally normed assessment, measures of academic progress, and we'll look at the results beginning in grade 3 through grade 10. This information allows us not only to look at all student groups, but to look at content areas, English language arts and mathematics, and then also to look at some of our student group information as well. All of these items align to the vision and mission of our system, the vision being, of course, that we want our students to achieve their highest potential. But in this particular discussion, we'll also focus on some of the key words of our mission, which include creating an environment of academic excellence through a collaborative, equitable, and rigorous learning community. So you'll hear some of those words come up again as we think about what it is that means the most in terms of our day in and day out decisions in the classrooms. What was presented the first time when we were together in August is that we had decided we would take the specific performance proficiency level. So we are looking at the measures of academic progress in the area of English language arts, and we identified a specific goal. By June 2022, we wanted to say something and be very transparent and set a goal that we would be accountable for through the course of 1 year. Sometimes we set those long-term goals, and it feels as though there's no accountability. Are you living up to what you set? So we really shifted under your direction to say we want to look at 1 year at a time, and we know that overall our performance last spring, 31 students were achieving at the proficient level.
31%.
31% proficiency in the area of English language arts. Thank you. And we set the goal of moving a double-digit jump to 41% on the NWEA map. By June 2022, all Kent County students will increase in math proficiency from 16% to 30%. And then the third goal is specifically wrapped around student groups and looking at any identified student group and expecting to close and decrease that gap by 50% as measured by MAP.
I've got a question for you. So what's your definition of being accountable? And if we don't hit those targets, what do we do? What's the I don't want to say the consequence, but what do we do about that?
When you're talking about accountability, I think it's a shared accountability across all levels. And that would be district, school, and student levels as well. So there's a variety of ways to approach accountability, and one of them is to continue to measure and make adjustments as you go along. So when we come back, we take this particular assessment 3 times throughout the year. So that means we give it in the fall, in the winter, and in the spring. And what that allows us to do, again, is to, in the winter, come back and we take a look at our results. Are we moving in the right direction? Are there adjustments that need to be made?
Who's
So-
in charge of deciding what the adjustments are?
That it's not on one specific person.
Okay.
So this is a that goes back to what we talked about, our mission.
Okay.
It's done in a collaborative effort at both the district, school, and classroom level. Because there are when you ask a question like that, there are many different components of making even a single decision in terms of curriculum, instruction, assessment. All of that ties into the achievement. It's not just sort of a
and I
one-
totally get that, but
piece.
accountable is one of those, big fancy words.
Sure.
We all want to be accountable, but that's why I wanted to know what accountable meant. Okay.
I have a question. I mean, it's still a pretty low bar. Is that because it's as realistic as it can be?
I think that's part of what we're going to discuss tonight, is just thinking about the goals that we're setting. And when we think about the target, again, and you look over trend data, you look at where we were perhaps 5 years ago, 4 years ago, 3 years ago, and you look at, are we making growth or not? And again, this is not just looking through the lens of Kent County alone, but looking at nationally normed data as well and other nearby districts. We're fortunate because there are many districts across the state of Maryland that use this very same type of assessment. So we're able, I think, to get a better feel of, is that target within reach? You want a target that, of course, is realistic and achievable, but also time-bound. So I think you have to consider all of those elements.
And I want to say I do agree that this is a very smart goal. The goal that was tasked to the staff that I work for was that we're going to get everybody to proficiency on math and reading by the end of the year with no suggestion, nothing to guide the direction. That was just the goal they threw out there. So I have to say this is something that are tangible. That we, saying coming from somebody that's in education, tangible, that we can put our hands on.
So the first marker for comparison will be when we have our winter testing, is that correct? And we'll compare
We're gonna
winter
go
to
So
our fall.
tonight, we're going to look at last spring to see, do we see any major shifts that need to be made for our actual goal that we're setting? Our schools have set their school improvement goals based on what we set in the spring. But you had asked that we come back to look at the fall to see if we need to make any tweak to that or if we should stay tight with what we set as our original goal. And that's sort of where we are tonight. Did I answer your question?
You did, and something I think that we discussed last time, I'd like to see, not just an overall, but a grade breakdown to kind of see where, for me, I want to be able to see where the students are having the most difficulty. Because when we talk about the math proficiency from 16% for all KCPS students, I imagine that we can see pretty clearly where that drop is if we have it by grade. So I'd ask for when we have our next review, if we could see it by grade also.
Absolutely, and that is readily available. So we
Great.
can share it both by grade and by the way we are doing it here, which is putting it all together.
Thank you.
Yeah, the other thing, I don't really understand why these numbers or percentages are presented this way. I mean, what's the special number of 61st percentile or higher, or 41st percentile or higher? What is that about?
Thank you for asking that, because it does look kind of confusing, just looking at the graph. But let me see if I can explain it, just sort of simplify it a little bit. We're looking at 2 bar graphs here. Basically, let's just focus on the district total. So the blue shows us students that have scored at the 61st percentile or higher. Why is that important? Because it's really showing us those that are predicted to achieve proficient on the Maryland State Assessment. So it is a very rigorous it is a very rigorous target, and it is something that we are required to strive for because it aligns with our state assessment. However, we also show the red bar. And if you wind back the clock a number of years in Maryland, you know we've gone from the PARC to the MCAP. We've shifted assessments. Well, it wasn't that long ago that we were looking at levels 3, 4, and 5 on the state assessment as proficiency. And that's what you see on the red bar graph. So you look at those performing at the projected 4 5s versus the 3 4 5s. And we like to look at both. We think both have a place in terms of making the best instructional decisions in our classrooms.
And I might add since we've never taken the MCAP and it's not been normed in terms of what we can expect, we felt strongly, and we talked about this during our retreat, that we didn't want to just measure 4s and 5s because we don't know how the MCAP is going to play out. So that's why we want to have both measurements in the forefront so that we can see. I mean, we're going to have a better idea once we take the MCAP this spring. We took the early fall assessment, which was MCAP, but that was just norming. And so we're not going to be able to have our first results until this coming year. So we didn't want to lose sight of where it might fall. So that's why you've got both measurements.
But you actually have measurements you can show us of, like Francoise was saying, specific grades, right?
Yes, they are available by grade, by individuals. We have individual student reports as well.
Well, I don't think we want
Right.
that, but
No, I'm
I'd be
sure.
interested in.
I'm
the-
just saying,
the
yes,
grade
they are available.
And also, the schools, how do the schools differ?
Right.
The next slide allows us to see and go back to that idea of 4s and 5s comparing the spring to the fall. So on the left-hand side, the blue bar graph shows us where the students perform. So we've switched it up a little bit here. We're looking at English language arts, students that scored 31% proficiency. So now we're only looking at those that scored levels 4 and 5, okay? I know it gets confusing with all the graphs. I have to say it very carefully because I mess it up sometimes. But this is only students scoring levels 4 and 5, and we're comparing on the left-hand side where they left off in the spring compared to the right-hand side, the red graph, their performance right now in the fall. And one of the things that jumped out, well, the first thing that I noticed as I was looking at it is that second bar graph. That's the only one where it stands out and you see sort of a big gap. Can you see that, the blue and the red? Well, what we need to know then, we have to peel back a little bit and understand that the actual numbers in Kent County are very tiny. So if we're looking at, even as an entire school district, the whole district, you'll have all of our students together. But if we look at our first student group, Asian students, the total number in that student group is 9 students. So you're going to see that graph kind of go haywire when you start, if students move around from one proficiency level to another. And I think that's just something important to keep in mind. We have a much larger body of students with our other student groups, African American, Hispanic, white, female, and male. But what you'll notice as you look at all the other areas, very little movement from one proficiency level where we left off in the spring until now, and that's really going to be what each of us should be considering as, we come up with the decision, do we need to adjust that rigorous target that we agreed upon in August, or should we just maintain, what we agreed upon to begin with?
Is that typical of what is called the summer slide, I guess, of the difference?
Yeah, my question was to that point, when in the spring is this assessment given versus?
Right. So last year, and Wendy, you're here, so we gave the spring in May, we gave the assessment, I believe it was May. Is that when the window closed? So it's a wide window. The next slide,
So can we
Yes.
just to put it in perspective? So this is telling us here that 30% of our students in the school system are proficient.
are projected to
be
reach
proficient.
proficiency
So
on the
that
state
means-
assessment.
That means, because we need to be transparent and realistic, that means 70% of our students are not there yet. Is that what I'm?
Right, well,
That's
again, we don't know whether the MCAP is going to count 3, 4s, and 5s. So what we're feeling confident is the 4s and 5s will probably be in that area. But if you look at when we did Park was actually a combination of 3, 4s, and 5s.
Okay.
So it just became too complicated in terms of us trying to determine which of the 3s would count, so we just did them in 2 separate graphs.
Yeah. And even with as we move on to
The next slide. So the next slide, again, as you were saying, now we're looking at students that would have scored 3, 4, and 5. And you can see here, we have a much higher percentage scoring at that level versus the 4, 5s. However, when you're looking at movement from spring to fall, very little movement across all student groups. It's pretty consistent. You'll notice a little bit of summer slide, but I think it's giving us a pretty good indication that it is a measure to show where our students are at this point.
Just a question for you. There's been some comments made at MSDE that some of the early results that they're seeing in other parts of the states have dropped like 20 points. So I'm not saying it's celebration time. I'm just saying that it seems like something is, explain it. Because I mean, there were some comments made that there were some folks that hoped that there wouldn't be any testing in the fall, and questioned why it was done, because the gap was so wide, but yet this isn't showing that.
Right. Well, again, we don't know what the correlation for sure is going to be with our MAP and our MCAP. It's because it has not been normed
Okay.
towards our current assessment that we're going to be taking in the spring.
Got it.
So instead of us waiting another year and saying, well, let's wait till we get MCAP, we felt that we should use our MAP assessment as a gauge to determine student growth and academic excellence.
Thank you.
So this is above the 40th percentile. The previous slide was above the
61st, yes.
61st.
yeah.
Is it okay to continue?
Yes.
Okay, so the next slide, we are looking at mathematics, I better just read it. Mathematics MAP Fall 21, grades 3 through 10. And again, this is showing us the assessment, the results of the assessment, and mathematics has been our greatest area of need and struggle. And it is one of the reasons we have entirely revamped and provided new resources, new training, and new support in the area of mathematics, including hiring for the first time 2 years ago a mathematics supervisor, which we have not had one in a number of
Coordinator.
years. I'm sorry?
Coordinator.
Of mathematics, Nicole Boyce. She has been serving in that role with the area of helping us really take a look and try to see, are there other things that need to happen to help us shift this and move it in the right direction. The next slide shows.
Do you have a sense of where the most need is for doing more learning loss for mathematics? Is it at the elementary level, the middle school level, or?
So we know two things for sure. One is things seem to fall apart when we hit the area of fractions. And it's very hard to be successful with fractions if you don't have that automaticity with numeracy and early mathematics. So, and the practices of mathematics have shifted greatly. For those that went to school in a time where it's, you memorize your facts, which is certainly something that we still do, and we still value that piece. When they take an assessment on the state level, students are required to explain their thinking, so they must understand and use mathematical language to explain how it is that they arrived at the various solutions. So it's a combination. There's still the sacred knowledge of learning your facts and learning your basics, but at the same time to get that to that higher level and understand fractions and beyond, leading all roads lead to algebra. I mean, bottom line, we know that's where we struggle the most. So it's about really getting that strong math sense, but I think the initial piece is probably around 4th grade where they start to see that higher level mathematics.
Thank you.
You're welcome. The next slide is mathematics comparing all 3 levels, how our students performed, spring compared to fall, levels 3, 4, and 5. And really, we, as an instructional team, when we looked at the results, we quite frankly were really surprised at such minimal change. I mean, we weren't sure what to expect overall. Remember when we left off in the spring, our students were hybrid. So they really had not gotten that full 5-day-a-week consistent education in quite a while. So in some ways, I think that we did not see more learning loss. We were so happy to see that. And I think this gives us hope that we just raise that bar and we keep pushing to move forward from this point on. So this is new to our district. We have not had a dashboard before. A dashboard is going to be a way of showing the public at a quick glance where we are. And as a board, you had suggested to us that we keep both the 41st percentile and the 61st percentile results on there so you could see everything at one glance, as well as putting the performance of our student groups. Notice kindergarten readiness is blank. I will tell you that we're hopeful that we will be seeing those results fairly soon. Our teachers have given the KRA, and that is the type of assessment where it's given one-on-one in the classroom. So the teachers work with the little ones, and sometimes it's by performance based. They have to watch what they're doing and take anecdotal notes, and other times it's just one-on-one assessments. So they do that the very first 8 weeks of the whole school year, and the results, they've now captured them, and we should be getting some of those back. Hopefully I'll be able to share those with you at the next meeting. So the next slide basically just puts right in front of us the changes, and basically what we see in yellow is the fall 21 data for ELA, the very first goal. The proficiency is 30. And in last spring, it was 31, and we set the goal to move to 41. In the area of mathematics, the current proficiency rate, 14. In the spring, it was 16. We set the target of 30. And the last goal that we set has to do with our student groups and just agreeing that we want to see a decrease of 50% on the map. And the question that we wanted to just think together about tonight is, after examining the current data, are there adjustments that you feel need to be made to any of these goals? And if not, where do we go from there with our goals?
One thing that occurs to me is having district-wide goals versus having something at each age level, especially because you're talking about, you kind of have seen that fractions is the point.
Right.
And the possibility of adjusting for grade levels. So say we want to have an increase of 15% at, by 5th grade, and then, but we're seeing that maybe 6th through 10th is higher, and maybe we adjust lower possibly for that if we see the need for that. But it's hard to, from this, for me to be able to say, do we need to adjust it? Because if I don't know where the need is greatest, then I don't know how to make the change. Yeah.
Just respond to that a little bit. So we're looking at this through the lens of the district. Mm-hmm. However, if you were to open up a school improvement plan, the school improvement plan will have their specific school target set. So they will know how their students performed, and then each principal has a school-wide student learning objective. And that SLO is also aligned to this, but you get even more specificity now. And when Ms. McGee had asked earlier about accountability, that's where you spell out the evidence that will show that you're making progress toward that target. So when you look at an SLO, and that may be something we can show you some samples of what they look like at some point, but I think that's where the rubber hits the road, because you're going to be able to see the commitments that are made at the district, at the school, and at the classroom level, you know, bullet by bullet spelled out on that student learning objective. So yes, I think you go a little deeper when you look at the school improvement plan, and then it gets very specific because each teacher has their own teacher-created student learning objective, and that's about their own individual students. So now they're looking at their student performance, and there are classes where they're way beyond this. They already have 47% proficient, so they're not going to set the target lower, they're going to push it up higher. So it's all about increasing it.
Is there a base target that we say, you know, a school can't go lower than this, it has to start at this target and up, or is that what we're saying with the district-wide target?
I think that's what we're establishing here. We are a model for the schools in terms of what that would look like.
Okay. Thank you.
I think these numbers show that we've got to do more to get proficiency for really everyone by the end of third grade. And if that and what can we do to make that happen? If that happens, these other numbers are going to look a lot better. How do we do that?
And I don't have an answer. I do want to share something that I think is hopeful, and that is for the first time, we now have something called the Early Fluency Assessment, and again, I know it sounds like it all comes back to tests, but these are not just tests. It's a way for us to keep our finger on the pulse of seeing that what's happening in those early years is making a difference. So we know, for example, in English language arts, as you've said before, to be a proficient reader, which should be what we all hands on deck to make that happen by third grade. If you can't read at that point, you're going to struggle for the rest of your time through school. So everything we can do to apply early intervention is critical. What we know about this assessment is it's a valid dyslexia screener. So it's pretty powerful. And this is the first year we have administered this, and we are being trained, administrators, principals, and teachers, in terms of how to interpret these results and how to take action on what we need to do to help with some of those skills, such as phonological awareness, phonemic awareness, foundational literacy skills. If we don't have that knowledge ourselves, then we're not going to be able to help our students go beyond just recognizing a letter. I mean, it's all about really understanding the code of reading so that they can be proficient and successful by the time they get to third grade. So I think I share that because, going back to accountability, I don't think there's ever been a time where you're going to be able to be presented with more data and more results. Is what we are doing working or not? And we'll be able to continue to monitor that throughout the whole year.
There was a time when we were number one. I know we're still pretty high up in our kindergarten readiness. So what happens between kindergarten and then the first tests in the third grade? Because our scores aren't very good. And is there any one thing you can put your finger on that we need, that maybe we should be allocating our resources in a different way when we look at our budget?
One of the things that I would say is we've changed our curriculum in pre-K and kindergarten in terms of using a more focused area in terms of providing more support in ELA and also math. One of the things about the KRA is it doesn't just test how students are doing in English language arts and math, but it also tests how they are, how they deal with the world around them and kinesthetic movement and that kind of thing. So in some cases, we do well in those areas, but we're a little bit lower in ELA and math. So overall, we do well in KRA, but there are some areas that we noted that we could do
So by the third grade, some of the things that we're for lack of a better word, graded on in kindergarten are no longer criteria. Is that what you're saying? I'm looking at
yes,
Mr. Johnson
yes,
shaking his head. Okay,
Yes.
okay.
Are there scores or percentage differences that you see that automatically trigger intervention or enrichment for a student? And then is that purely based on what the teacher is providing, or do we also have staff that are providing additional enrichment and intervention?
So I think two questions. If I can respond first to Ms. McGee's question about what is it that we need. I certainly support what Dr. Couch has said. I think she's absolutely right in terms of the early years and what happens. And, you know, our teachers now, what I am hearing and what they're telling us in their written feedback is, give us time to understand the resources you're providing. We have provided so many rich, new, quality resources that they need to be able to unpack and understand and be able to apply it to their classrooms, you know, without having to every day go back and think and understand. So that's the work that, some of the work that we're taking on at the district level as well, is working with them collaboratively to be able to take that, unpack it, and turn it into what you would consider engaging lessons in the classrooms, so our students are getting the best of the best.
This might be a question you can't answer, but without being disrespectful to anybody, how long does that take, and how long do we wait? You know, I don't want to hear 3 years from now, oh, I'm still unpacking, you know, and
Yeah, I don't have 3 years to wait, right.
I know, but I'm just saying, everybody in this room knows that probably the biggest mark against us is our test scores. So I'm not doubting that this could make a difference, but I don't want to have to say to somebody in the public, well, give us 3 years and you'll see that we're doing better. So
I think the fact that we are going to bring results to you regularly will allow us to see is what we're doing working or not.
Okay.
We can't afford to wait 3 years, which is one of the reasons, rather than hanging our hat on the state assessment, we're going to be looking at a nationally normed assessment because we feel the urgency to show the numbers and not just keep saying, let's just see what works. I mean, I don't know anyone that doesn't feel that.
We have changed so many different things that we kind of have whiplash. So what's your definition of regularly bringing us this information?
I would say in December would be the next time we'd be able to come back.
Like quarterly or something like that? Okay.
I have a couple of questions. Oh, go ahead.
I just want to get back to
The target setting?
to what you had asked us. I personally don't think the goal needs to be changed. I think we have to have something. I rather, I always say this, strive and then see where we come up short, then let's fall back. No, I think, push forward and hope. I think it also starts, and I say this every month, it always starts at the building level. And how are we, I understand, SLO is one thing, I understand school improvement. It has to be an immersive experience for our children. They must understand that they have to set a goal and attain that goal themselves. We can't just put it always on the teacher. We can't put it on the parent. We can't put it on the student. It takes an immersive experience for that to happen. I was explaining to the staff that I work for, we were looking at our D&E data. Very, very, very high. And I was explaining to them the same thing. We keep trying to figure out what's working, what's not working. Let's do this, let's do that. But what we fail to recognize at some levels of education is that it becomes a community. It becomes a culture of how do we do this? How do we provide a space for our students? Back in the day, we had data books for students to align and say, this is the progress each time to set that goal. And I think the other roundabout of this is when we are servicing our most precious learners, we need to actually bring in their voice. We spend time and time again bringing in teacher voice. We spend time and time again bringing in administrator voice and our voices, but we don't have the student voice. What do our students stand in the need of so that they may be successful? I mean, you can gauge that at every level. I need this from you to help me be successful. And I think if we do that and put that in the front of our minds, I think these goals will be attainable. And until then, I'm not sure if I have all the hope that we attain it, but until we start putting some of the other things forward, I think we'll be successful.
Yeah, so I just want to add, and I know Dr. Costa, you want to, so my question is, we're asking for, and I don't disagree with you, Mr. Johnson, on that and what that looks like, but where does that responsibility land, right? So we talked about, the curriculum change, we talked about, teachers taking time to look at that, but what other added resources would help? Not that it can happen, but to understand what the added resources would be in that age, those age groups, whether it's building level or whatever it means, just to kind of level the playing field, if you will, so that it's not all on the teachers, and to Mr. Johnson's point, he disappeared on us. To Mr. Johnson's point, if we want to engage and work with the kids in a deeper way, how would that look? Do we just, what I don't want to see is that we just throw it at the teacher and say, here, go have it,
Right.
have at it. So I guess I'm just asking for just some food for thought as to what that looks like, because I don't know what that looks like. So, and it doesn't have to be answered now, but I'm just saying, just to keep it, is it some, I mean, I know we talk about head count all the time, but is it something else? Is it someone else? Is there something there that would help that?
I do want to say something just because
Yeah.
I'm moved by what you're asking, and I do know, having, many, many years at the elementary level, when you're talking about personalizing learning, it is hard to do it when you have a large class. So I think, we and you as a board have made a commitment, and you've heard over and over, we have that good fortune in many cases, not all, and maybe that's the place to begin, is sort of looking at, are we able to personalize that learning, and do we have that? Because that matters a ton. I mean, if we want to make a difference, we have to be able to commit to that. There are many pieces that go into it. I would love, if anyone else wants to respond to Mr. Getz, but I want to go back so I don't forget to Ms. Sullivan's question. I'll do that in a minute. Anyone else want to respond?
I would just like to say that we're also looking at our data on a regular basis as an administrative team. So there are a number of principals that are talking about how to engage and to bring forth the student voice. And they are looking at setting goals, individual goals by student. And then, does the student understand where they're at in the matrix, and where they, what do they need to do in order to improve their scores as a whole? And these, the wonderful thing about the MAP assessment is we can send those assessments home to the parents as well. So the parents are very much involved in terms of getting those reports and seeing how our students are doing. So we get those reports 3 times a year.
I had a question. What percentage of students have either dyslexia or other learning disabilities that make it difficult to learn to read, for example?
So I will turn to Wendy for the percent. I do know one of the reasons we've been asked as a state to give this screener for dyslexia is because we have been under-identifying dyslexia. So
I mean, the state as a whole. It's not
right,
just us
not
personally.
Kent County.
It's
No.
state
The
as a whole.
state of Maryland. That's one
Yeah.
of the reasons that the House bill was passed, and we are now giving the dyslexia screener.
17% of our population.
And some of that is for dyslexia, but a lot of it isn't, right? A lot of it's for other things.
Students are considered learning disabled. The majority of our learning disabled population is considered to have learning disability as dyslexia.
In numbers, what does 17% equal? Okay.
About 278 students receive special education.
Okay, thanks. Were you going
What
to do
it-
the math?
I was good.
What about spending some of our COVID ESSER money on, trying to, I know we have some tutoring, but far more, so that every child who's, say, in 2nd grade or the beginning of 3rd grade gets some tutoring, some extra help.
That's a nice segue back to Ms. Sullivan's question, so I think I can tie them both together. We have shared with you in terms of what we currently have planned for our ESSER funds, and our biggest challenge right now is finding staff that are willing to come in and serve in those roles. Because if you're looking at, in certain instances, you have scripted programs, such as Sound Partners,
Yeah.
where it's fabulous research-based literacy intervention, and we've expanded that from one school to all 3 elementary schools. And those tutors come in and work one-on-one with students, and we see the results. Again, put your money where your mouth is, bring it up, and we can look at that data. That's part of what we do on our regular meetings monthly with our interventionists. We also have a variety of other tutors, but like I said, it includes the literacy tutors. We have Title I tutors that specifically tutor in math and reading at elementary level as well as middle school level. Last year, Dr. Speary shared that her students prefer when teachers were willing to stay and tutor them beyond the day. So she did some creative things with her own staff, paying them to stay after and do some additional support and tutoring with the students as well. I think there's great value, and certainly I know Dr. Couch approves of the tutoring programs and would like to see that continue and even some cases expanded. Our greatest challenge right now is we can't fill the positions we have. If there are folks that are listening, we would love it. Please email. We do need help at the school level with some of these additional supports that are needed.
And then don't forget the Trojan Influence Program, which is after-school tutoring as well in math, in the area of math.
I mean, I've talked to parents who really don't think they should have to do anything at home, that the school should do everything. And, you know, generally, you know, nationally, the schools in wealthier communities do better. And, you know, people don't really ask, well, why is it? It isn't just that those people have big bank accounts, because a lot of those people, you know, read to their kids or make sure that their kids are reading every night. I think we have to really communicate with parents how important, especially these first 3 K through 3 really are. And we shouldn't have anybody going to middle school who's reading at a 2nd grade level, which we do have. And there's parents have got to be more involved in this. It's just not acceptable to say, oh, I shouldn't have to do anything at home. Kids need to read at home. And I don't think a lot of parents really get that. But that's the way you become a good reader. Teachers can't do everything, and there aren't that many minutes in the day.
So, if I'm understanding you correctly, we have the money and not the staff, right?
Correct, in
So
some
what-
cases.
What are the counties around us doing? I mean, are they in the same boat we are?
It is not just a Kent County challenge with the staffing. It is across the shore and probably across the state, I would imagine.
I think we should look into training volunteers, getting commitments from them, you know, making sure they pass background checks and whatever is required. But just having a couple of tutors in these schools isn't enough.
No, we have more, I mean, we actually have more than a couple of tutors. As a matter of fact, we have one that's sitting out in the audience that is doing some of the Sound Partners. But, you know, it's a matter of that we've got enough money to hire more. We just don't have enough people to fill the positions.
But we're advertising.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, there's some school systems that are down 60 to 100 people starting the school year. Teachers, everyone. It's
Yeah, I know.
pretty bad.
But we're capitalizing on the ones that we do have, and I think that the ones that we do have are very committed. We have some retired teachers that are come back on and are doing some of the tutoring. And so our principals have been doing a really great job in terms of trying to recruit and trying to keep some of our high-quality staff members that are willing to tutor. And, you know, it's a decent salary, so, I mean, it's
But this is during the regular school days, so aren't these kids not doing something else? It's not in addition to the school day, right?
So it's scheduled during the day, but it's during a time where they would have small group instruction, so they're not missing their core program. They would be working with a small group, and
They're just getting more.
Yeah, we're more intentional about when we do the tutoring so that they're not missing the core program.
Okay.
Ms. Giacomo, to answer your question on that one slide, I think we stay with the data, the goals listed,
Yes.
and then measure accordingly as we go from there, so.
So may I ask, just for clarification, do we want to begin with I know it's only 1 percentage point. Do we want to leave it as 31 to 41, or do we want to change the ELA 30 to 40, or does it not matter? I mean, I just want to,
I say my opinion is we keep it where it's at. So 31 to 41 is where it is, or if you want to change it from 30 to 41.
to 41.
That's fine,
Okay.
because that's more realistic and more now, but.
But I'd like to see it better, by the end of third grade. I think we should have a higher bar at that real turning point, the end of third grade.
What I will do is bring back by grade level the next time, so you can look at it as the whole, and then I'll also bring another slide by grade level for each content area, so you can see that. Now, this assessment, we start in grade 3, so that's the first time that they take the growth.
I wonder if we can't, since we're having a difficult time finding people, if there isn't an opportunity there to see about incorporating some of our high school students who maybe need service learning hours or something like that to volunteer in some of our other schools, or have kids come to a tutoring session once a week or once a month at the high school or something like that, if there's an opportunity to kind of build that kind of tutoring and mentoring between students.
Yeah, especially the ones who want to be teachers, because we have a
Right.
teacher academy.
Teacher Academy.
The last, and then for mathematics, did you want, again, we initially put down moving from 16%, setting the target at 30, and it's looking like we're starting at 14. I just wanted to bring it, again, back to the group. What are your thoughts about the target?
I'm comfortable with the 30 still. I don't know how.
I'm the same. I mean, I think we just, if we have to adjust the low number,
Yeah.
keep the goal where it is on these, and we'll go from there.
I appreciate your help and your input. And for those that perhaps are not here with us right now, but just trying to make sense of some of the numbers that we have up there, when I work with the other Eastern Shore colleagues, they were very surprised that we were setting our targets so high in terms of only capturing 4-5. But I know that our board wanted to do that because we felt like that was predictive of our state assessment. Many other districts may have higher proficiency levels, but they're capturing the 3-4-5. So if we were adding that, we would be starting at 50% or a much higher percentage. But we agreed, based on the input that you gave last time, that we want to focus just on that 61st percentile, that aiming for that high target. Is that how we want to keep it?
Yes.
How do you intend to reduce the racial achievement gap?
What are the strategies for addressing the equity?
Yes.
So we have strategies that at the district level, we have Dr. Holacher. I believe she may have shared some of that with you. We have some whole system-wide initiatives that include training. Rosemary Allen is someone we have worked with before. We also have a training coming up for our January Professional Development Day that all staff members will be part of. But the most important work that we're doing to address the equity, I'm actually going to share with you in just a moment. It has to do with the revamping that has been done with our classroom-based assessments using a program called Edulastic, where teachers are able to get in and at their fingertips have access to the performance of all students in their class, so they can make decisions in terms of, do I see the gaps occurring, what needs to happen, what is working and what isn't. It's very specific depending on the content that you're teaching, the grade level that you're teaching. It's very unusual to give a broad stroke, this is the one thing we're doing to address equity. As a district, it's certainly awareness of implicit bias, and that's been something that we have but we have had initial training on and continuous conversations and training at the school level as well. So the next slide just wanted to...
May I
yes.
just make a suggestion that in order to be a little more clear with terms of these particular academic progress goals, that we note that it's at the 41st percentile.
The 61st, okay.
Excuse me, the 61st percentile. And that way, it's clear in terms of we're looking at a narrow group of students.
Thank you. We'll make sure we put that on there. When you're thinking about the work that's getting done on a daily basis, we wanted to share with you under the direction of our math coordinator, as well as one of our newly hired instructional specialists, Kelly Melvin, has been working with grade level teams in the area of mathematics. So this is a screenshot. I apologize, it's not crystal clear, but what it's doing is giving you the level of detail that's going into each unit in mathematics. So if I am a third grade teacher and I'm teaching unit 1, this is the actual direction. It will give you the standards that you're focusing on. It has certain things such as the planning map hyperlinked in there. It will give you strategies for differentiating, resources to be used. I love the one section our teachers added, which is they wanted the manipulatives actually named so that if I have something where I need to use counting blocks, I know that I pull those out during that unit, and that becomes one of the key tools that I use to help our students. But this leads me to the next slide, which goes back to the question you asked earlier about equity. So that unit links to common formative assessments. So we don't want to wait until the end of a 6-week unit to know, did they get it or not? Do they know how to solve this problem or not? So teachers are creating mini assessments as grade level teams. And what you're looking at here is actually one of our second grade classrooms. And I love this because when they work in teams, if you push a certain view, it will change the actual student names to things like Green Bike and Pink Bell. It takes their name off so they can talk about individual students without naming the students. And this, I wanted to show you, is a screenshot of one of the types of reports that our teachers have as soon as they close out the administration of an assessment. This second grade teacher also receives the next slide, which shows an item analysis. So when they're looking at question 6, it will force them to go back and think together as a team. Is this a problem with the question, the way we asked it? Is that why they did not understand that? Is this a standard that we need to reteach? So we have never had this level of detail so accessible, and teachers said this is one of the best tools in terms of really making data-based instructional decisions.
And I might add, this is one of the new tools. This is EdgeElastic. This is that tool that we talked about and we brought forward and discussed at one of our board meetings.
And they're able to look at this real time, you said?
Yes,
Okay.
as soon as the class finishes the assessment, they have access to all of these different reports.
I might have missed this when I was stepped out. How long, when a teacher teaches a unit, how long do they stay on a unit? And then, let's start with that question. I want to hear that answer. How long would they stay on a unit?
So our initial units, and they vary depending math or English language arts, and they also vary by grade. So I can only give you a general. I would say most opening units are lasting anywhere from 6 to 8 weeks in a unit.
So within that unit, how many objectives or standards are they trying to cover?
That's a really good question, because no matter what new resource we put in front of teachers, there are always too many standards identified, and you don't know what to focus on. So what our teachers are doing, and I showed that a minute ago, this was an example in mathematics. What our teachers have done is they have identified what they call focus standards. So they've looked and they started their planning with the end in mind. And the way they do that is they meet as a team and they have the teachers take the unit assessment. So they begin by taking this Unit 1 assessment, and then they go back and identify what are the major standards, what are the supporting standards. And that's the beginning of building this unit template that we have in front of us here.
So with that being said, I think the point where I want to go with this question is, okay, we have our state standards. When is it set standards? When is it, are we waiting till all students to get mastery before we move on to the next standard? Or are we saying if, 80% of them, the other 20% don't get there, do we move on? I think that's what I really want to.
So the answer is not just that we move on. We do move on to Unit 2. However, that's where they have the small group, what they would call a double dose. So you would be able, for example, here, where you look at, back here, where you look at individual students, and some students mastered 7 out of 7. That's the pure green going across, where others have mastered 5 out of 7. They can go back and they can use the types of reports that are given in this particular unit assessment to pull together small groups for a double dose and extra support with specific standards.
So I guess my question is, what is the logic behind sticking with a standard until every student gets mastery on that standard before we move on? I just want to hear some thoughts about this idea of sticking with just the one standard until everyone's mastered that standard before we move on. Because I would think the standards will build upon each other.
They do.
And so if they're not getting that, then they're still delayed extra, and we're still trying to play catch up each and every time.
Right, but the downside to that is that you're holding everybody back when some are ready to go on to the next standard. So it's got to be a balance that you're scaffolding a lot of the support that you're providing to the students that may need a little bit longer to master it, but that shouldn't prevent them from learning new standards.
That's true. I guess just curious, within that standard, there's the differentiation of the standard, and what does that look like, I guess, is really what I'm getting at too.
So we are aiming for proficiency for all. That doesn't mean that, we're going to stop the class and not move on until everyone's 100% green, but you are going to tailor and provide those individual supports, the tutoring and other supports to help everyone continue to have opportunities to learn and achieve mastery of that standard.
In the case that this data that you're presenting to us now on the screen, one of these students were absent. So this student would have had the opportunity when they come back into.
Correct. Right. This is really all within the classroom control. So it's unlike MAP, where we have to work at what the timeline that we're given by NWEA. This is all within the classroom control. They can decide.
And on average, just talking about weekday average, we're talking a typical standard within that unit would take maybe a week to get through, or are we saying 2 or 3 days?
That's a good question. It depends on the standard,
Yeah,
right? Some are much
varies.
more complex and higher level. And there are times where we teach multiple standards together. You're not just teaching one in isolation. So again, I don't think there's a single answer for that question. One of the things we were trying to show tonight is the ability to just wrap our head around everything that's involved in terms of seeing growth and achievement, and what it is that we're doing with our time each and every day to try to make sure that our students are getting the richest, most quality education they can in the classroom. So some of that, as you can see, comes from the tools, from the training, from the presence of our administrators, from the work of our students. The other piece is when we have those professional development days. And so we had one recently in October where students are home, teachers come in, and we have training together. And, you know, sometimes it's hard to think about, does that really have an impact or not? And I wanted to share with you just the feedback from our October PD. I pulled out a sampling, and again, this is something, if you're interested, I can't wait. I want to read every single thing that's on there. But if you're interested in this, I can share the entire thing with you. But what I hope to point out here was the link with what the teachers are saying and the commitments to what we've made this year from August until now in terms of the work that we're doing. So here's what our teachers had to say. I'm just going to read 4 of them. After this professional development day, now mind you, we had a variety of sessions. We had training on Edulastic. We had training on the English Language Arts program. We had training in mathematics. We had science. So there was a lot going on in that one day. Teachers were in different various areas. So one of the comments, the third one down, creating formatives in Edulastic will help in forming small groups and individualized instruction. That's a quote from a Kent County Public School teacher after receiving training in Edulastic.
So can I ask a question? So at the beginning of the school year, they were not trained in Edulastic? And
Correct.
So what were we doing for formative assessments then?
This is, we just started with Edulastic. The purchase was made, and this was the beginning.
So what were we doing for formative assessments then?
Paper, pencil.
Okay.
Teacher made.
So, okay. So what this sounds to me, I'm not discrediting it, that creating formats will help forming small groups, but wouldn't the paper that was already being given inform small group instruction? That's what I'm not trying to get on feedback.
But there's no difference. There's a big difference in terms of being able to do it by hand when you have 26 little ones that you're scoring versus the push of a button being able to get it at your fingertips. So,
I just wanted to.
right, I hear you. Yes, it is not new. It's not as though we've never done formatives, but having the tool and having the training, according to this teacher, proved to be effective in that it's helping them change their instruction. Then, go ahead.
So the things that you have said made me think, and I see that this one teacher wrote that basically we are able to provide individualized instruction. But I thought you said maybe 20 minutes ago that we weren't able to do that.
I think what I had said is when you have a large class, it's much more challenging to individualize that instruction.
Yeah, you did say that, but you mentioned 20. To me, that's pretty big class. Our largest classes are what, 25?
I would have to take a look. I think
Okay.
probably, yeah, you're probably right. 25 to 27 would be our largest.
Yeah, that's pretty low. That's a good class size compared to the rest of the country.
Oh, no doubt. Right. And again, I think you look at class size and think of student age, right? That's the big thing, because students can be more independent in terms of middle school, high school. With the little ones, again, that's where we usually see that we as a district are putting our resources, that we have the smaller class sizes. So my point was that's something we need to keep our eye on, being able to individualize.
Mr. Johnson, with 35 kids in your class, do you have tools like this, like Edulastic, to help you?
I wish I could say I don't. I do, but I don't have these tools that are available. Most of our assessments are still paper and pencil things that we have to do, and then turn those in and put that data in ourselves. So it is nice to have something readily available, but I can't say that we have that in our district. So
Gotcha.
Do we have, in every grade level, in every school, at least 2 classes?
Yes.
Okay. So I don't know the proper phraseology because it changes all the time. I remember once the phraseology was ability grouping. So how do our kids get assigned to a classroom, because I'm thinking back to the, not remedial, but the double dose or whatever thing, when Nivek was asking you about a kid hasn't got the standard yet, we don't want to hold 24 kids back if the 125th can't get it, but our kids, I know it's not the right word in the year 2021, and I don't know what the right word is, but how do kids get assigned to a classroom?
So I would just ask that we think not in terms of being assigned to a classroom, but differentiating the instruction.
Okay, yeah, so that
is
still
something-
gets my question answered. How does that happen? And is that the case? Because kids learn differently, and they learn different subjects differently, so.
So teachers and teacher teams work together to determine the grouping with their administrator at the
Okay.
building level. There are times
So we
during the
are
day.
cognizant when we group students. we ha-
Absolutely.
okay,
Know
good, yeah.
work, right. You
Because
may
I know
have
the-
smaller
the
groups.
thinking with it has changed, you know. There was a time when, you know, you put students of all different learning abilities and hoped that the higher risers would encourage the lower ones to come up. And then there was an outcry about that, and they were like, well, it doesn't happen that way. My kid's a higher riser, and he's being pulled down by that. So I just wondered.
So what you're describing is tracking students.
Okay.
And that's something we never want to do again. I
Okay.
mean, if you track a child, you early on put them in a group that is a low-level ability group, and there they remain, never having access to the vocabulary, the thinking, the opportunity to be around others that may be able, again, to pull everyone up. However, our teachers, what they do as teams is, in most cases, I can't speak anymore, I'm sorry, the classes are heterogeneously grouped. So
Okay.
very often they're mixed ability, but within that mixed ability, it is very likely that you'll see the students have small groups where they will work with them. So you may have a group of higher performing students in one area, such as a unit in mathematics, that they are together, yet a different group of students may be together because they're more accelerated in the literature circle. I mean, just two different examples. You don't want to track them. That is something that's proven to be
So
a
how does
poor practice.
one teacher in a classroom handle that?
A lot of times they work with their fellow teacher.
Okay.
You might have two teachers in a grade level, and they may determine that you're going to work with these two ability groups and work with them and provide those supports, whereas I'm going to take this other group of students a little bit further. So that's where that collaboration and that teaming works well.
So using your terminology, tracking, do we still have something called gifted and talented?
We do.
Okay.
We have a talent development, gifted and talented. It is not a pull-out program, and I heard earlier Dr. Costa mention, you know, we don't do anything until middle school. We have a menu of options at the elementary level. In the early years, they have something called primary talent development, PTD. Now, I will say that our new staff have not had any training on primary talent development. So it is something that needs to be revisited and something that is incredibly helpful. They are units that are pre-written, such as bubbleology in grade 2, where students as a whole class, they don't do this for a pull-out group. Every student in that grade level gets access to it, but teachers have to be trained on recognizing certain behaviors that they're looking for success and growth in those units.
So we have that at the elementary?
At the
middle,
elementary,
and-
that's with the little ones.
But I'm
So
just saying, I'm using gifted and talented. I know that's not what it is, but you get the gist of what I'm talking about.
Yes.
So do we have that at elementary, middle, and high school?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes, and in grades 3 and up, what we have are a variety, we have a handbook that describes the various options. They can range anywhere from subject acceleration. If you have a child that is gifted in mathematics, they may work at a different level, even at a different grade level at times for a certain subject for part of the day. There are also various groups, and I know several of you have seen this in action before. Touch Stones and Touch Pebbles in the area of literacy is one of our other elementary programs. And then this year, through our Title IV grant that Ms. Spiro wrote, we were also looking at some other after-school options for addressing GT as well. So There are programs available. Some of them are digital. In mathematics, we have one for acceleration, and others are more face-to-face and small group. What we do not have is a teacher for the gifted in each school. We don't have, that is not a staff member that is assigned to that for each school.
Did you used to?
The last time we had that was probably in 1992, where we had, through a grant, we had some that rotated through schools. It's been a long time.
Is that something that you would, not necessarily you, aspire to? Or is that passé in educational
I think
philosophy now?
there's certainly value to it, and it's something, our gifted council met for the first time, and they will continue to meet. I think one of their goals is to bring forward to the board some recommendations to enhance our gifted programming. So I will mention that we talked about it here and certainly get the
One of the
feedback from
reasons
the
I'm
council.
asking you is, I've heard Sam say that he's not challenged, so, and I'm
I've heard a
sure-
number of parents
And
say
I'm
that.
sure he's not the only one that feels that way, so,
Say the same thing.
okay.
I think there are more things we could do.
Okay.
Oh, I think that was the end. Are there any questions? Finally, sorry.
I always wanted to say I do commend your hard work and your team, Ms. Giacomo, for, you know, academic learning is never easy. You know, it's sometimes because we're dealing with theory, we're dealing with whole child, we're dealing with social emotional learning. A student can come in one way, go out another way. A student, we're dealing with teacher, you know, retention. It's so much impacted into instructional learning. And so I always commend the hard work that you all do put in. I just always wanted just to stay on target and, you know, get us back to, you know, number 1, number 5, wherever.
And
And-
I wanted to,
Oh, I was just going to say, let me just say this real quick while I have it in my mind. I just want to note that over the years, this board has made commitments to add more supports and staff, because there for a while, I mean, it was just Ms. Giacomowitz trying to steer the ship in terms of academic achievement. So now we've added through grants, through ESSER, through commitment from the budget, adding additional academic team members. And I do want to commend Ms. Giacomowitz and her team, because they work very hard and they try to focus very much on where we see the targets, where we need to improve, and then always researching to see where we can add more resources to help our teachers. And then they focus our PD in terms of making sure that our professional development is constantly focusing on what we can do to improve as a school system. So it takes a lot of work, and it takes a great deal of commitment and passion, and Ms. Giacomowitz and her team have a lot of passion.
thank you.
Thank you.
I was just going to say, for some of our board members maybe who don't have kids in school, that the fall map testing that took place, I attended a parent-teacher conference in elementary school, and that was part of the parent-teacher conference, was a discussion about, this is my personal child's map testing and how that looks. And it's interesting that there can be a difference between how well they're doing on the map testing versus when you're looking at interim grades or report cards. So in map testing, you might have a kid that is excelling in reading and vocabulary who isn't getting those sorts of grades in their class. And so it's interesting to know, hey, my kid does know how to do these things, but for some reason it's not showing up in a regular report card or an interim report card. But it is something that is shared with parents and discussed with them about both the math and the reading. So, and I want to echo what Nivek was saying, and Dr. Couch, thank you very much for all of this work.
From our team, we appreciate that. We say small but mighty. We're just going to keep plugging away. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, that report was for information only. No action was required by the Board of Education. The next item on the agenda is the notification of our next meeting. The next meeting of the Board of Education of Kent County will be held on Monday, November 8th, 2021. The meeting will begin with open session to be immediately followed by the board members going into closed session. The open session meeting will resume at 6:30 PM. The meeting will be located at the Administrative Building in the boardroom, this room, at 5608 Boundary Avenue, Rock Hall, Maryland, 21661. The last item on the agenda is the administration is recommending approval to adjourn the meeting. Do we have a motion to do so?
I move that we adjourn.
We have a motion by Mr. Johnson. Do we have a second?
I second.
Second by Ms. McGee. Any further comments, questions? Hearing none, we'll call for the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes. Thank you, everyone.